Good evening, I'm Mary Garofalo, and welcome to 16 by 9, The Bigger Picture. Canadian Professor Phillipe Rushton is a man drowning in controversy. His books about race and intelligence and speeches he's made at white supremacist conferences have many labeling him a racist. Well, tonight, our Paul Johnson travels the U.S. and Canada for this exclusive story in search of the man everyone wants to talk to, but only 16 by 9 found.
Mr. Rushton, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
Meet Phillipe Rushton, a professor at the University of Western Ontario. He's been called a racist, a white supremacist, and a promoter of hate.
Can you clarify? Are you a racist?
But first, watch what happened when one of our producers asked him a few simple questions.
You're teaching our children about your book. Now, how can you...
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay?
Rushton has a good reason to be wary, because when he's not accidentally hitting producers in the face with his suitcase,
Oh, excuse me.
he's provoking this kind of raw emotion.
We say no to racist fear! Fascists not welcome here!
This was the tense scene recently outside a Virginia hotel where Rushton was speaking.
The title of the talk is The Heritability of World IQ Differences. Can we know whether these differences are due to the genes or are they just due to cultural factors? And I will be arguing that it's due to the genes and providing some good new evidence to show that.
Rushton is here to talk about his work exploring links between race and intelligence, which some here take to mean some races are smarter than others. The organization that invited him here is the American Renaissance.
It's an organization we've listed for the entire time it's been around as a white supremacist hate group.
Mark Potok is the head of intelligence for the Southern Poverty Law Center, a U.S. human rights group that tracks racist rhetoric.
The reality is that this is a meeting that is regularly attended by such leading lights of the American radical right as the neo-Nazi and Klan leader David Duke. At this very last meeting, a man named Don Black was one of those attending. Don Black is the former Klan leader for the state of Alabama and currently runs the most important white supremacist website on the entire internet.
Please welcome Phillipe.
And inside, Rushton lectured about the breeding of some population groups.
And if you look at breeding patterns, of course, we all know that it's the bottom half of the population, the lower IQ half of the population, which is having all the children.
And the mental capacity of the black race.
Africans are not borderline retarded. It's much better to look at them as having a mental age relative to the 16-year-olds of Europe of about 11-year-olds.
All of this talk was too much for these angry protesters outside, who say people like Rushton and organizations like American Renaissance promote hate.
We say no to racist fear! Fascists not welcome here!
And while Rushton's academic work has long been controversial, some students we approached here at Western had no idea about Rushton's extracurricular activities. We showed some of them video we had of Rushton talking about race and intelligence.
Speechless. I don't have to say anything, you know. We can all see where there's a problem with that.
This is uncalled for. I don't support it whatsoever, and I don't believe we should be teaching here.
I personally don't think this is appropriate at all. I don't.
Rushton says he is simply pursuing legitimate academic research and doesn't necessarily support the views of those that quote it. He says he's happy to talk to anyone interested in his ideas. We contacted Professor Rushton on numerous occasions to talk to him about his books and controversial views, but he declined our requests for an interview. Producer Brian Baltz was able to catch up with Rushton, suitcase in hand, as he was leaving his London, Ontario apartment.
Mr. Rushton, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Mr. Rushton, can you clarify? Are you a racist? Mr. Rushton, are you a racist? There are a lot of allegations. I'd just like you to clarify for us. Are you or are you not a racist?
Well, you caught me at a bad time. I'm on my way out, so I'll have to ponder your deep and meaningful question when I come back.
You're teaching our children about your book. Now, how can you?
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay?
He just cracked my tooth.
Our producer suffered a cracked tooth as Rushton smiled and drove away. What I wanted to ask you about, though, was, do you endorse their views? Rushton did call us and tell 16 by 9 that he's traveled to the U.S. to speak to this group as many as 5 times in the past 12 years.
Is there any evidence that the IQ of sub-Saharan Africans has declined in recent centuries?
Wouldn't the influx or immigration of less favored races into our society possibly serve as a positive advantage to the eugenic movement?
He says that doesn't mean he endorses their views, but he doesn't go as far as repudiating them either. In preparing this story, university officials questioned the characterization of the group Rushton spoke to as white supremacist. And as a tenured professor, they say Rushton is protected by the principle of academic freedom.
The university is a place where we encourage our faculty to engage in whatever academic pursuits that they see as appropriate.
And what that means is that while many Canadians may find his ideas repulsive and offensive, he's free to continue his work and his extracurricular activities here in the United States without having to worry about his job.
Some activists say his case pushes the concept of academic freedom to the absolute limit.
They have to look at whether Professor Rushton is using university resources to somehow spread racist information and racist propaganda, whether he's relying on his stature as a university professor to do something like that, and whether his students themselves are getting a fair shake.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay?
While Rushton offered an apology for the incident with our producer, we never did find out much about his personal views and whether or not he supports those who use his work that Canadian taxpayers help pay for, to promote hate and intolerance.